Reverb is a very essential plugin that you use on all your tracks, and there are so many stock reverbs that I have also done tutorials on. Today we're going to look and understand about a new reverb called as Valhalla Vintage Verb, and this is a very common reverb I always use on majority of my projects. So I'm going to exactly teach you what all the knobs available in this reverb does so that you can try them on your tracks. If you've not already seen my previous video on reverb and delay, the link is given over here. I'm Florina Jane, otherwise known as Flow of Music. Now let's go ahead and learn about Valhalla Vintage Verb. This is Valhalla Vintage Verb. This is how it looks like the moment you open the plugin. So we're going to look at all of these knobs and a lot of modes that are also given below and see what each of those things do. So the first thing, you have a button called as color, and you have three options: 1970s, 1980s and now. Based on whatever you decide to choose, you get a description below. For example, you choose now, it tells now, no downsampling, full bandwidth, bright, clean modulation. So you're gonna get a very bright reverb. When I change it to 1980, you're getting a dark, noisier modulation. And in 1970s, again, it's dark, noisier modulation as well. In 1970s, you have downsampled, and in 1980s, it's no downsampling, that is full bandwidth. Here, there is a bandwidth at 10 kilohertz. There is a frequency change in that. So these are the different modes that you have, and you can choose one depending on the song that you have. Maybe you have a pop kind of a song and you have vocals for that. I will probably choose now. Again, you have something called more right next to it. Now it's selected in concert hall, but when you click it, you have all these different presets. So suppose you want plate, you just select that and you also get another description below. Fast and diffuse attack, bright tone, fast build of echo density, chorus modulation. So you can read this description by changing the mode and choose one that is fit in your track. Now you have pre-delay. The moment the dry signal comes into this reverb plugin, when is the reverb going to kick in? Is it after 15 milliseconds or is it after a very later time, like after 112 milliseconds? That can be determined using pre-delay. So once you set the pre-delay, how much of that reverb do you want to listen to in your actual sound? That can be determined by this mix knob. So suppose I say 23%, it means the amount of reverb that you get through this plugin, only 23% of that is going to merge with your dry signal, and that's the output that you listen to. If it's full, that means the entire 100% of the reverb is going to be heard along with the dry signal as well. Decay is how long you're going to listen to that reverb. So it can last from 0.2 seconds to as long as 70 seconds. These three knobs are also available on the stock reverb that you have in Logic as well. The rest of the knobs that we're going to see now gives you more detailed understanding on why this is a third-party plugin and why you should probably consider using Valhalla Vintage Verb. So the first set of knobs comes under damping. You have a set for high frequency and for bass frequency. In the high frequency set, I can decide and choose a frequency. So right now it's set to 6000 Hz. Suppose I choose 3100 Hz. Right from 3100 Hz, I can determine if I want to have a high shelf or not. So we know how a high shelf looks like. Let me show you in an EQ. This graph is the high shelf graph. So right now I have kept it to 0. So it's showing 0 dB. So if I want no change to happen in this frequency, I can just put 0. That means the graph is not doing any movement. Suppose I feel like because of this reverb, I'm getting too much of high frequencies and I don't want them. You can easily do a high shelf by doing that. So visually, if you want to know what's happening, this is what's happening. And exactly at 3100, so I'm going to input it here. I have reduced minus 14 dB, which means around this. This is what is actually happening. You can't visually see it through the reverb plugin, but this is what is happening. So when the dry signal comes into the reverb plugin, when you do high shelf and when you reduce it using that frequency that you selected, then all those higher reverb that you get to listen to are going to be attenuated. That's what is happening. So you can determine how much you want it to reduce. Either it can go as low as minus 24, which is very low, almost like that, almost like a high cut, right? or you can reduce it, meaning you can make the graph look like that. Now let's go to the bass frequency. Bass frequency works slightly different than the high frequency that we saw. So let me just change the decay to a round off number like 2. So exactly at 2 seconds you're getting the reverb length. Now I'm going to select a bass frequency and suppose I choose 290 Hz. And if this knob is set to 1.5, that means nothing but we're going to multiply 1.5 into the decay seconds that you have set here. So 1.5 into 2 gives you 3, which means this bass frequency that you've selected, the reverb that comes on top of that, for this frequency you will hear a longer reverb length, about 3 seconds. For the rest of the frequency, the reverb will stay only for 2 seconds, but for this bass frequency alone, you will hear a longer reverb length. Now let's move on to shape. You have size knob. Basically means when you have lower percentage, the size of the room where you're going to get the reverb from is going to be very small. When the size is more, which means the room is bigger and your reverbs may be different. So this attack knob contains the initial attack that you get from the reverb. When your attack percentage is low, that means immediately the reverb is going to act and you get the initial reverb sound itself. When your attack percentage is less, it means the attack is going to happen immediately and you get the reverb sound of all those starting elements. When your attack time is more, when the percentage is more, it will take a longer time to have that attack. Diffusions are similar to the reflections that you get. Early diffusion and the late diffusion are how long it's going to take for those reflections to actually reach your ear. So when you have a very short early reflection and a very short late reflection, it'll almost sound like only a delay. In a reverb, you get that ambient sound as well, but in a delay, you just get repetition of the note or the tone that you have, right? So when you have both of these very less, it almost sounds like a delay. When you have this very high, then you will hear that reflection really well, and based on these things, the tone of your reverb will also change. Modulation is like a chorus effect. So whatever track you add this reverb on, you can increase or decrease the depth and change the rate, and you will hear a chorus effect. Just like the chorus stock plugin that you have on Logic, this also emulates the same thing except that it's working on the reverb and not on the direct dry signal. And lastly, you have an EQ knob. You have two knobs. One is high cut and one is low cut. So usually I tell people to add a low cut after the reverb because you get a lot of low frequencies accumulated and that might occupy a lot of headroom. In this, you automatically have high cut and low cut inbuilt in this reverb. So I can cut some frequencies right below, 80 Hertz, and high cut, if I want to cut it, I can cut it, or I can just leave it to whatever it is. You also have a lot of presets to choose from. So when I select this, I can go to ambience and you have all these things, or you can go to room and you can select whatever you want. So if I change the color to 1980s, this is how it will look like. All the knobs that you see here are the same thing, but the way it sounds, like for 1980s, you get a dark and noisier modulation. That's the effect of this one. So normally I don't add reverb directly on the channel strip. Instead, I add it on the bus channel. And the way I set this mix depends. Sometimes I keep it to 100% and control the amount of dry signal that goes into this using this knob, or I send all the signal there and control it using this. So it works both ways. It depends on a lot of tracks. Usually, the common way I do it is keep it in 100 and control it over here. It again boils down to how you use reverb. That's all that you need to know in order to use Valhalla Vintage Verb in your songs. This is a really good reverb and it will give you a lot of natural tones itself to your song. So if you have this reverb, do try it out in your tracks and let me know if you found this useful. So I hope this video was useful. Thank you so much for watching. Keep making music and I'll see you guys in another video.